This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Since the 1990s, education has been required for all South Africans from age 7 to 15. Last December, the government announced that 70% of students passed their final examination to finish high school. In 2008, the passage rate was about 63%. There have been increases each year since then. Professor Shireen Motala at the University of Johannesburg says access to basic education is no longer the problem in South Africa. She says most children stay in school until they are about 16. The problem now, she says, is that large numbers of them leave without completing high school. Students take an examination known as the matric in grade 12, their final or matriculation year. But Professor Matala says only around 45% of the children who started school in 2000 sat for the matric last year. South Africa has a 24% unemployment rate. Those who drop out must compete with better educated people for jobs. Educational researchers also point to another problem. They say South African schools do not produce enough students with the skills for higher education in math and science. Researcher Graham Block says many schools are not well equipped. The reality of poverty, he says, is that many children do not see laboratories or libraries at school. 92% of the schools do not have libraries. Also, education specialists say in many cases, teachers and school principals do not have the skills or training to do their jobs. In other cases, they are simply not doing their duty to provide an education. Professor Matala says a number of teachers were poorly trained during the system of apartheid or racial separation in South Africa. Apartheid ended in 1994. Secondly, she says, teachers have been confused by the many educational reform efforts in the last 15 years. And finally, she thinks language differences in the classroom have not gotten as much attention as they should. Subjects such as math and science are taught in English, starting at about age 10. But South Africa has 11 official languages and many more unofficial ones. South Africa's Minister of Basic Education promises a number of improvements. Andri Matshega says teacher development efforts will focus on subject and content knowledge and making sure the correct teachers are in the correct jobs. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Pursuit.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. 26,000 foreign exchange students are in American high schools this year. We asked 4 teenagers who arrived in August to discuss their experience so far. All but one are attending public schools in Fairfax County, Virginia, outside Washington. Johanna is from Germany. She says the biggest difference is the relationship to the teachers. She says here the teachers are more like friends, and in Germany they're more like parents. Another difference? In American high schools, the students are usually the ones who move to different classrooms for different subjects. Johanna and Daniel come from schools where the teachers change classrooms. Daniel says, in Austria, you have all classes together with the same group of people, and so you are really good friends with all the people you're in class with. Hande from Turkey is living with a host family in Denver, Colorado. She says students in Turkish schools have less choice. She says, you cannot choose your own classes, and you don't have the right to drop out of one of them. Hande says Turkish schools are also more formal. She says, when a teacher comes into the class, you have to stand up and greet the teacher. He or she says good morning or good afternoon, and as a class, you answer. We don't do this in class here. How does the education compare? Hande is in 3 advanced placement classes, which are meant to prepare students for college. She says AP courses are really hard, and they really force you to learn and are really good. But the regular classes, their level is lower than in Turkey. Rosa is from a country where high school is 5 years, not 4 like in America. She says, in Italy, we go to school only during the morning for lessons, and Italian schools don't have other activities. On the other hand, she says, having to go elsewhere for activities is not necessarily a bad thing. She says she thinks students in Italy and Europe have a freer environment. They are in touch with a lot of different things that are outside the school. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. To learn more about high school exchange programs, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also comment on this and other programs. And you can find us on YouTube and Twitter at VOA Learning English. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Today, we answer a question from a listener in Colombia. John Anderson wants to know the costs of undergraduate and graduate study in the United States. Well, the first thing to know is that prices are different from school to school. Private colleges and universities generally cost more than public ones. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all students pay a school's published price. Financial aid and scholarships may reduce the cost. Here are a few numbers for this school year from the College Board Organization. The average published price for undergraduate study at a 4-year public college was about $7,000. That was for students from in-state. Students from other states, as well as international students, paid an average of more than $18,000. This is the bad news. International students often have to pay the highest prices. And these averages were only for tuition and fees. Food, housing, books and supplies can add $10,000 to $12,000 a year. The College Board says the average tuition at a private college was about $26,000. Many students save money by starting their education at a 2-year public college, also known as a community college. The average tuition this year was about $2,500. A few American colleges provide a free education, including the military and merchant marine academies. They accept some foreign students. Berea College is a small Christian school in Berea, Kentucky, that pays all first-year costs for its foreign students. But they are expected to pay $1,000 a year after that. Summer jobs are provided to help meet this cost. Costs for graduate study in the United States also differ from school to school and even from program to program. Here, too, public universities charge more for out-of-state tuition. For example, at the University of Kentucky, out-of-state graduate tuition averaged about $18,000 this year. In-state was about $9,000. American students often have to take out loans to help pay for their education. President Obama recently signed into law a bill that changes the student loan system. We'll have more on that next week. And international students can learn much more about studying in the United States on our website. Look for the Foreign Student Series at voaspecialenglish.com. And that's the VOA Special English Education.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Teachers and parents usually call attention to the pictures when they read storybooks to preschool children. But a new study suggests that calling attention to the words and letters on the page may lead to better readers. The 2-year study compared children who were read to this way in class with children who were not. Those whose teachers most often discussed the print showed clearly higher skills in reading, spelling, and understanding. These results were found 1 year and even 2 years later. Shane Piasta, an assistant professor of teaching and learning at Ohio State University, was an author of the study. She says most preschool teachers would find this method manageable and would need only a small change in the way they teach. They already read storybooks in class. The only difference would be increased attention to the printed text. Ms. Piasta says if you get children to pay attention to letters and words, it makes sense that they will do better at word recognition and spelling. But she says research suggests that very few parents and teachers do this in a systematic way. The report appears in the journal Child Development. More than 300 children aged 4 and 5 were observed in classrooms in Ohio and Virginia. The children came from poor families and were below average in their language skills. This put them at risk for reading problems later. For 30 weeks, the children took part in a program called Project STAR, for Sit Together and Read. The project is based at Ohio State. It tests the short-term and long-term results of reading regularly to preschool children in their classrooms. Laura Justice at Ohio State says researchers think they understand how information about print is transmitted from the adult to the child. This knowledge can be gained by having focused discussions when reading a book out loud. Professor Justice says this intervention can help adults center in on the things that children need and want to learn. There are different ways that adults can talk to children about print. They can point to a letter and discuss it, and even trace the shape with a finger. They can point out a word. This is dog. They can discuss the meaning of the print or how the words tell the story. And they can talk about the organization of the print. For instance, showing how words are written left to right in English. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. You can read and listen to our programs at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Today, we have the last of 3 reports on bullying. Last week, we shared some of your comments on this issue. Now, we talked to a researcher who presented a study in May at the Pediatric Academic Society's meeting in Vancouver, Canada. Rashmi Shetgiri is a pediatrician at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center and Children's Medical Center, Dallas. Dr. Shetgiri said about 30% of American children are involved in bullying. She said about 13% of them are bullies, 11% are victims, and 6% are both bullies and victims. The new study led by Dr. Shetgiri shows that parents could help prevent bullying by improving communication and involvement with their children. The study identified factors that seem to increase or decrease the risk that a child will be a bully. She said children who have emotional or developmental problems or who have mothers who have poor mental health are more likely to be bullies. Older children and children who live in homes where their primary language is not English are less likely to be bullies. Another difference, the study found that African American and Latino children were more likely to be bullies compared to white children. For the study, the researchers used the 2007 National Survey of Children's Health. Parents of children aged 10 to 17 were asked whether their child bullies or is cruel or mean to others. Not surprisingly, how a parent acts may also influence whether or not a child becomes a bully. Parents who often get angry with their children and feel that the children often do things that bother them a lot are much more likely to have a child who becomes a bully. However, parents who share ideas with their children and talk with them are much less likely to have children who become bullies. University of Nebraska psychologist Susan Swearer says, communication between students and teachers can also reduce bullying. She says studies have shown improvement when students are taught about bullying and respectful behavior. Some programs also try to get people to intervene to stop bullying. Professor Swearer advises parents and teachers to try to get children to talk to them about being bullied. Otherwise, a child could feel hopeless and helpless to do anything about it. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. No one likes to make mistakes. But a new study says organizations learn more from their failures than their successes and keep that knowledge longer. One of the researchers was Vinit Desai, an assistant professor at the University of Colorado Denver Business School. He worked with Peter Madsen from the Marriott School of Management at Brigham Young University in Utah. They did not find much long-term organizational learning from success. It is possible, they say. But Professor Desai says they found that knowledge gained from failure lasts for years. He says organizations should treat failures as a learning opportunity and not try to ignore them. The study looked at companies and organizations that launch satellites and other space vehicles. Professor Desai compared 2 American space shuttle flights. In 2002, a piece of insulating material broke off during launch and damaged a rocket on the Atlantis. Still, the flight was considered a success. Then, in early 2003, a piece of insulation struck the Columbia during launch. This time, the shuttle broke apart on re-entry and the 7 crew members died. NASA officials suspended all flights and an investigation led to suggested changes. Professor Desai says the search for solutions after a failure can make leaders more open-minded. He points to airlines as an example of an industry that has learned from failures in the past. He advises organizations to look for useful information in small failures and failures they avoided. The mistakes we learn from do not have to be our own. We asked people on our Facebook page to tell us a time they had done something really silly. Fabricio Semino wrote, "Not long ago, I wanted to watch TV, but it wouldn't turn on, so I did everything I could to start it. 30 minutes later, my mom shows up and, passing by, says to me, 'Did you try plugging it?' I was like, 'I'm just dusting, Mom,' so she wouldn't notice how dumb I am sometimes." Bruno Kanieski da Silva told about a time he looked everywhere for his key. It was in his pocket. He wrote, "I always promise I will never do it again. But after a few weeks, where is my wallet? For sure it will be in a very logical place." You can find more comments like these on Facebook at VOA Learning English. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.